If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. First of all, it's free. There are creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or your computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. Guys, this is huge. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership whatsoever. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started.
Welcome to the Habits of the Few, where we discuss habits, rituals, and mindset tactics that you can use to reach your version of success. And now, here's your host, Naboulsi.
Thank you guys again so much for tuning in to another episode of Habits of the Few. Today's episode is incredible. What a phenomenal opportunity to be able to communicate with the one and only AJ Vaynerchuk from VaynerMedia and VaynerSports. It was just such an honor to be able to chat with him and to dive deep into how he was able to attain so much success at such a young age, and the discipline, the drive, and the determination that he was able to really develop is just incredible. It's just so motivational and so inspirational. So I urge you to, as always, to listen to the entire episode. And I thank you so much for listening and tuning in today. So without further ado, enjoy the rest of the show. What's up, AJ? How are you doing for you this afternoon, for me this morning?
Gotcha. Where are you based, Cali?
Portland, Oregon. So close enough.
Yep.
Yeah.
Do you hear me okay, or should I try to get some headphones on?
No, you cool. I can hear you,
okay.
Man.
Awesome.
So I'll do the intro and everything later. I kind of just want to dive right into it. This thing is all just conversational. So thanks, man, for being here today. I'm super pumped. I appreciate you taking the time. I know you got a busy ass schedule.
Well, I appreciate it. I'm humbled you wanted me on.
Oh, absolutely. I kind of want to get into, I'm so curious. I've been incredibly curious. How the hell did you get into the whole agency thing?
You talking about the sports agency?
The sports agency, yeah. How does that kind of happen?
Yeah, it kind of parlayed off my background, running VaynerMedia with Gary. It's not, as from a business perspective and how it works, it's not a big leap at all to running an advertising agency to a sports agency. And then in terms of how I got in, really when I left VaynerMedia, I was the chief operating officer there, spent first 7 years of my career running VaynerMedia. I took some time off and really kind of just dug deep to figure out what I wanted to do next. And landed on this notion of, I think what probably made it click was sports have always been my biggest passion. Mm-hmm. And I think in a way, like I said, it didn't feel like a big leap to take what I learned. I thought I could take a lot of what I learned building an agency and applying it to a new industry with sports. So that blend of passion and previous experience and feeling comfort that I could be successful was how I got to that place.
That's awesome. And I see that you guys are just primarily working with NFL players, and I could be wrong. Do you ever see yourself kind of going into the NBA, maybe boxing, maybe even UFC?
All of it's in play. We're purposely staying focused on football. I'm a big believer of making sure that the core business is foundationally sound before branching out. I think it's a mistake people make is maybe they see opportunity, they jump at that opportunity and spread themselves too thin. So really just hunkering down, making sure football is rock solid before expanding. But we're in a fortunate place, I think, between the brand of the last name as well as my brother's personal brand and his platform. We have athletes from other sports reaching out to us on a weekly basis. So we're kind of just saving everybody's name and sending a nice message back saying we're not ready yet. And then as we're ready to expand, we'll expand. So I know a brief story of how you guys kind of got started. I know that what was I watching the other day? I think it was a video where you turned 21 on Wine Library. That was so funny. And like your brother was just like so stoked. He was like, I've been waiting for this. Started this thing. You guys have a pretty cool dynamic. I'm the oldest out of a lot of siblings, so I kind of understand and I can resemble a little bit. But what's your take on this whole thing? What was it that
that I guess accumulated your discipline, your mindset, your habits? What were the things that drove you to, first and foremost, you and your brother actually wanting to start a business in the first place? Like, put agency aside, just wanting to become entrepreneurs.
You know, we had that example at home, right? Our father's an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
And our father immigrated from the former Soviet Union to America, made a life for himself and our family through business and entrepreneurship. So I think first and foremost, that example at home is a massive, aspect of becoming an entrepreneur. Not that you need that, but for us, it ended up being that way. And then also to multiply it, Gary and I are 11 years apart.
Oh.
So, a really big gap. Yeah, he looks good for his age.
Yeah, no, he really does. Yeah.
So Gary's 43 and I'm 32. And so 11-year gap is huge. So in the sense that I think some timing also played a factor, in the sense that when I was 12, 13, and 14 and really starting to dabble in entrepreneurship, and my dabbling was like going to garage sales and flea markets and flipping things. Gary has that YouTube show, Trash Talk. I lived that for a long time.
Yeah.
And so 12, 13, 14, Gary was 23, 24, 25, and he was partners with my father in the wine business. So my formative years as an adolescent and a young adult was sitting at the dinner table with my brother and my father talking about business. So it surrounded me, and it's something I obviously gravitated to, and my father and my brother loved it and they had success with it, and it made sense for me too.
So you're significantly younger than your brother, and where you're at today is incredibly successful. Where do you see yourself in like the next 11 years?
The next 11 years. I honestly think I'm going to be doing the same thing. I am constantly thinking about what do I want out of life.
Yeah.
And that cliche of work-life balance. I have a 19-month-old daughter at home.
Congrats.
Thank you. We're expecting our second in April. So
oh, wow.
I'm constantly trying to figure out how to balance friends, family, work, things that interest me. What I love about what I do now is that, and I was fearful of it, was this combination of passion, hobby, and business, right? Where was there a possibility that I would ruin sports and watching sports and keeping up with sports by getting involved in the business? But I haven't felt that way in nearly 3 years in. So the more I can get to a place where the work that I'm doing doesn't feel like work and feels like what I would do. When I was a 16-year-old kid, I'd come home from school and jump on, NFL websites researching the draft. And that's what I do now for a career too. So 11 years from now, probably just doing something very similar at a larger scale, because I'm also very competitive and I want to be successful. And that's another thing I love about this business, is that there's a scorecard, there's winners, there's losers, there's results, there's historical record. It's all, this business in general, and this one in particular, is a sport in and itself.
So it's almost like a football player, a kid that's a football player that loves the sport and finally gets to achieve his dream by actually playing it in the league.
Yeah. I mean, it's similar. I never had the athletic prowess to be a professional athlete. I knew that pretty early on. So I guess this is the next best thing. Yeah.
You're leveraging your talents, right?
Right. In a different manner.
Yeah. Yeah. So you guys got early on, I think early on you guys were able to invest successfully in some pretty awesome companies that are significantly huge now. What was it that drove you guys to like, hey, we're going to invest in this?
I'll give all of the credit on that front to my brother. Neither of us, the same way we had the example of entrepreneurship in our household, we did not have the example of investing in venture capital type activity. Mm-hmm. Our father was the type to not even have money in the stock market. Immigrant, have it all in the bank, don't touch it, don't risk it, that kind of vibe. So, a lot of the investments that are public, Gary did himself prior to me having the funds to be able to do it. Mm-hmm. So I didn't do Facebook, I didn't do Twitter. I was lucky enough, VaynerMedia was far enough along where I did get to do Uber, I did get to do Venmo and some others, but he really set the path forward on that. The work that we were doing with VaynerMedia was really blending Silicon Valley and Madison Avenue together, pairing up large corporate Fortune 500s with these emerging startups, which back in 2009 or in the mid 2000s was Facebook, was Twitter. So I give Gary a ton of credit for building those relationships, having the foresight to get involved. And, once he made a few investments, I was eager to jump in as well.
So how would you, I guess, so we're doing around 6,000 daily downloads so far with this podcast. It's fairly new. It's only been a couple months, 3 months. And there's obviously something that we're giving that is of value to the audience. And I've noticed that most of the generation is mid-20s. So, like between 23 and like 26 years old, I would say is the bulk of our audience.
Yeah.
What's something that you can give them? Like, I'm fairly certain majority of these folks are wanting to become entrepreneurs or maybe go into business themselves. Like, what was it like to be the CEO of VaynerMedia day in and day out, especially you being so young? Like, what were some of the things that you had to avoid, that you had to look for? What were some of the stresses? Like,
yeah.
Would you mind kind of going through a little bit of that?
No, not at all. So first, you want me to kind of speak to like some advice to somebody?
Yeah.
I think entrepreneurship in a lot of ways is like anything else, right? And so I think a big aspect of why I was successful was twofold. One, I had a mentor in my brother. My father was an inspiration, but he worked so hard. He wasn't really around as much to kind of guide me through the ground floor of entrepreneurship. So my brother was my mentor. And I think I'm super lucky to have a brother, a best friend, a business partner, a mentor, all wrapped in one. Most people don't have that luxury. So, but identifying a mentor. And then two is really the practice side. I think a lot of times for people that I knew, for a lot of them, they felt like I jumped into entrepreneurship at age 22 and kind of just figured it out. But really, there was all these reps on a smaller level that taught me big lessons, kind of shaped my way of thinking. I was 12 years old and I could walk at age 15, I could walk into a thrift store and walk out of it with a few $100 in a matter of 10 minutes, right? I could look, and that came from just hours of studying. I would literally, this is real, I would literally go on eBay and spend 4 hours researching mugs. That's it. I would literally look at and I would look for patterns and themes, right? Because there's a quadrillion mugs, but Starbucks mugs are worth money. Any brand of Starbucks, any brand of coffee was big, Dunkin' and Starbucks. And then, other things translated like Disney characters and concerts, like just finding niche and patterns so that I could walk in and make an educate, and at age 15, I didn't have an iPhone where I could go on eBay and look it up. It's much easier today. I literally walked in with my brain and had to figure it out. And so, I would soup to nuts go through the journey of selling, where I would do the research, I would find the market, I would buy the product, I would be the creative director taking the photos, I would be quality control, making sure the mug wasn't broken or cracked or chipped. I would do the marketing of posting the title and the description. I would do customer service, answering questions. I would do package and handling. I figured out logistics because I was shipping out 20 to 30 packages a day while still going to high school and still trying to be a kid. I would come home and my bedroom had 20 packages in the Monday container and 18 packages in the Tuesday container. I started creating order numbers and UPC codes that I just made up to kind of like understand categories of stuff, so that once I posted something, I could box it up right away so that it would be faster to like get it out of there. And so that's just a good example where, age 12 through 22, whether it was doing eBay or I taught myself HTML and CSS and was building websites for small businesses in Boston when I was going to school there. Like, I was doing entrepreneurship on the ground floor and at the kid level before I did it at the business level. And so if you're 25 now and you've never done anything entrepreneurial, my first thing is, rather than trying to come up with $1 million idea and raise venture capital and go big, get some reps. Literally find ways to do small orders of business and entrepreneurship to kind of learn the ropes with low risk.
I think that's phenomenal advice. You had an e-commerce business, essentially.
Yeah. I mean, I was making a few $1,000s a month as a 15-year-old kid.
That's a lot as a 15-year-old kid.
Like 25 to 30 grand a year profit margin.
Yeah. I mean, you could buy yourself anything you wanted. You wanted a video game, you bought a video game.
I thought I was a millionaire at age 15. Because comparatively to all my other friends.
Well, yeah, of course.
They were worried about like how much we went to McDonald's. I was like, McDonald's, $6.
Right. They had to go through their allowance if they even had one, right?
Exactly.
That's so funny. Do you guys ever think about getting into e-commerce? like today as an agency? Do you ever think about?
Yeah. E-commerce has always been interesting to me because e-commerce was really the backbone of my family's business really exploding. That was the big thing that Gary brought to my father's business that exploded it was winelibrary.com and e-com. So I always had a love and an interest in it. And I think eventually I'll get down that road. And Gary and I, you know, it's funny, going on vacation at our house turns into like an offsite. Like, yes, we're there with the family and we can have some fun, but inevitably it's almost impossible for us not to, you know, at some point just start talking about business ideas for 2 hours, you know, at the pool or at the dinner table. So e-commerce is always something I gravitate to, and I'd be surprised if I never do it.
Yeah, it's nuts, you know. So I have an agency a little bit smaller than yours, but we have a lot of e-commerce clients, and we primarily work with like running the ads and doing all of the email marketing. It's insane what they're bringing in. I mean, and most of them are drop shipping, so they're not even holding any product. Sure. They don't have their own product. You know, it's nuts. Like, do you think that it would be more? Do you think it would make more sense to develop your own product, or would it make more sense for somebody who's just starting out just to do like drop shipping? Like here's something that works, just you know, sell it, find a distributor or find a manufacturer, and then. I
think you're starting drop shipping. It's kind of crawl before you walk before you jog. You run. And what I would say is, you know, if you're 24, 25, 26, you probably still have to work another job to sustain this. You know, the less overhead you incur, the less risk you incur, probably the better. So yeah, I think drop ship probably at first. Make the mistakes while you're drop shipping as opposed to your own product. You know, there's a lot of things to do with your product. So, and I think even when you go to your own product, be mindful of what that product is. You know, I invested in a company back in 2010 that built some sleep tracking technology. Two guys that never really did hardware before. They went out of business real quick because their sleep tracker device exploded because they got the wrong manufacturer in China, and they had like 3 devices explode, and they got sued and bankrupt and finished. And so I think I think patience is key, and just figuring out what's manageable, what's accomplishable, and get some reps and build towards it.
Sweet. So if we wouldn't mind backtracking a little bit, talking about how being the CEO and how you were able to do that, how you were able to, like, what were the things that, I guess, like part of your daily life, like what were some of your tasks? Like what was the perspective and the expectation? I think a lot of kids, you know, and you know this more than anybody, you and your brother, where you're getting a lot of kids now on like Instagram and Twitter, and they're putting like CEO on their handle for their bio, right? And you know, and they're looking at being an entrepreneur as being like a professional athlete. It's like the new thing. It's like a rock star or whatever. So I don't know. I would love to hear it from somebody who's experienced it, and I would love for that to be addressed to them so that they can get a realistic, you know, a perspective of what it really means to be a CEO of a big company.
Yeah. So for VaynerMedia, just to clarify, I was actually the chief operations officer.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
That's okay. But
still a giant.
Yeah. Especially at 22 when it started.
Yeah.
And VaynerSports, we don't have the CEO title. We kind of keep it co-founder and things like that. But I operate essentially as the CEO. Yeah. So I can do it to an extent. I think, so one thing you said that definitely jumped up at me is like the notion of people applying the CEO label to their single member business or anything like that. And I think what I would be cognizant of is that a lot of people can see through that. I think the general public and your network is a little bit smarter than you may give them credit for. Like, I think it's a bad look to assign yourself the CEO title of a pre-revenue single member company, right? Like, just say you're the founder. That's accurate. And yes, CEO is technically accurate, but I think to your point, it's almost like you're trying too hard and you're trying to create a false front, and a false front's not attractive. So I would avoid that. As far as like what a day looked like and the trials and the tribulation, like, at least from my experience with VaynerMedia, it was, no day was the same. You know, when you're starting a business, you wear every hat. Like, you need to be able to be in a client service business. You're the top point of contact for the client on strategy and customer service and creative and project management. You're the front line of defense for everything. And then also, hey, is the toilet clogged? Go ahead and fix that. You're the CEO. None of your employees want to fix the toilet. So I think having a humbleness, I think a thing that will kill a young CEO is a tremendous ego. because I think a lot of people will struggle with somebody who maybe lacks a track record and success that has an ego. That was something I was always very insecure about and mindful of was, I employed a lot of people that were either my age or older. Some of them were my friends from high school and college. So I was always very perceptive of how I came off in my role. Like, yes, I have this authority to make this decision, but I have this authority and I'm using this authority for the better of everybody as opposed to the power trip. Right. So I think mindful of if you are a young CEO and you have employees that are friends or close in age or older, don't abuse the power. I think it's the number one way to lose somebody. I think being a leader is being inclusive and being with them. There's a graphic, I've seen it. I can't credit it or think of it, but there's basically like, I think it's like an Egyptian pharaoh. And in one side, it's the pharaoh being like carried on top of like a big throne, and there's like 4 servants carrying him.
Yeah.
That label's like boss, right? And then the next one is like that same transportation carrier, and like the pharaoh is like leading the front, pointing the way and carrying half the load, and that's a leader. And so that was always kind of how I took it, where I'm not like, especially in the early stages, in my opinion, nothing's too small. VaynerSports is still a young, nimble team. Like, I've been very lucky to have great success. We're still really scrappy because in my opinion, like, even though I've been successful and I'm financially secure, the business hasn't achieved that success. The business isn't that financially secure, so we need to earn it. So that'd be my biggest tip, is being self-aware and being a leader, not a boss.
I think that's huge. And that kind of takes me to my next, and probably my last, because I know you're short on time here, but self-awareness. Mm-hmm. I know both you and your brother talk about this a lot. I have been racking my brain, researching. I've been trying to understand self-awareness for quite a long time. I think I understand certain aspects of my innate ability. Mm-hmm. But what is self-awareness? How can someone develop or understand?
So I think self-awareness can be developed. I think it's, again, practice and repetition. I think probably the best way to develop self-awareness is to communicate with those that you interact with. Mm-hmm. Ask them for feedback and ask for genuine feedback and not allow yourself to have your feelings hurt. So
yeah, that's huge.
I think self-awareness is a constant. It's always on. And so I'm always thinking, how am I coming off? What kind of energy am I providing? How, if I were in that person's shoes, would I receive the message I just delivered in the environment I just delivered in? So I think it's constantly just kind of thinking, putting yourself in somebody else's shoes, perceiving you from the outside. And then, like I said, I think the way you practice it is to be mindful of it and try to be taking a step back, kind of catch yourself in the moment and just kind of take a step back and say, okay, like, how am I coming off? How may this person interpret this? One of my favorite quotes, I think it's Maya Angelou, I could be wrong, I don't want to look stupid, but I think that's was something like, when you meet somebody, they're probably going to forget what you did and what you said, but they're not going to forget how you made them feel. And so I think that's a big part of self-awareness, is being cognizant of how somebody feels when you're interacting and engaging with them. And that's whether that's your friend, your significant other, your employee, your potential business development lead. That applies to everything, no matter if you're a CEO or an entry-level employee. And so as far as getting that practice, finding people that you trust and have a relationship with, and maybe you wrap up a meeting with a friend of yours who's a peer or whatever, and you just say like, hey, like, how are you feel? Like, how did that make you feel? I said that 10 minutes ago. Was that okay? Like, really being transparent, communicating, and getting to the heart of the issue, and making it a safe place for somebody to give you that feedback. Because if you ask for feedback and somebody gives it back to you and you become defensive and argumentative, you're never going to have feedback again.
Right.
So being humble, being receptive, asking for it, being a great communicator, being clear, and then absorbing it and understanding what it means.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much for that, man. I think that's a perfect way to end this podcast. So before we leave, I just wanted to let you know, if you're okay with me promoting this, we put it all over the place. And,
sure.
And I'll send you a link, both video and audio, when we get it done. And I really appreciate your time. That was freaking awesome, man. It was awesome.
I've got like 2 or 3 more minutes. Is there anything else you and I can talk about before we wrap up?
Oh, yeah. So let's see here. It doesn't
even necessarily have to be for the podcast. Like, if there's anything on your mind or anything like that.
Okay, cool. So I've been in the advertising industry for probably 17 years now. and around there. I started in affiliate marketing when I was 17. And then I go back and forth between closing down the agency, getting into e-commerce, or closing down the agency and getting into consulting / this podcasting thing.
Yep.
And I'm having a really tough time. I've been talking to a lot of like my mentors and things like that about it, because I started this podcast about 3 months ago, didn't really start doing anything like seriously until like January, like end of December, early January. And it just took off, and I've been able to like, I've like, you want to go about self-awareness. I've been really like, I'm really fulfilled doing it more than I've ever done anything else.
Nice.
You know, where can this lead? Where can I go with it? Can it do other things? But you know, after I do this, then I have to go back in the office and yada, yada, yada. So would you suggest to follow what you feel instinctually in your gut and utilize all of your skills to do something with this, maybe turn this into a media company? Right? I don't know. We're just kind of shooting the shit.
One thing that runs through my mind is like, why do you have to shut down the agency? Can you not get to a place where somebody can replace you day to day, and it can be...
Yeah, it's happening now.
Yeah, I think you can have your cake and eat it too. I think, you know, I don't know your financial situation, but what I would say is understand what kind of lifestyle you need to live and what you have been living with the agency. Figure out the best way to maintain some level of financial cash flow that's based off that previous success. Focus on this thing. And then as it evens out, if you get to a place where this is making more money in the agency, then you don't care if it dies, right?
Right.
But I think practically you need to kind of juggle both in the meantime. And then just as one continues to grow and the other one dips, like just calibrate, keep an eye on it on a weekly and a monthly basis. But I would chase what you want to do. And I also understand how much of a grind the agency, client services world is. I did it with VaynerMedia and I'm doing it now with VaynerSports. It's different, but it's the same. So I have empathy for that. And I would chase this if you can. It's just a matter of practicality.
Yeah. I think that's the perfect way to do it, because I need to be able to feed my family and all these other families, right? So
right. Sounds like you're doing it though. It's 9:30 your time and you're recording a podcast. You're not running an ad for a brand. So it sounds like you're on your way. You just got to keep digging at that and finding a way to optimize it. And then the number one tip I would give you, that was always something I focused on while growing VaynerMedia, is take some time this weekend. This is a great exercise. Reflect on all the things that you did for the agency over the last 2 to 4 weeks. Identify which ones you hated the most and try to find a way to outsource that first. So if it's like, hey, I spent 3 hours in the last 30 days doing accounting reconciliation, and it makes me want to jump out of a building, find somebody else to do those 3 hours, whether it's an outsource or giving somebody else a responsibility and a little bit of a pay bump. Find the stuff you hate the most, get rid of it, because then it'll make this entire process even more tolerable. Chip away at it.
That makes tremendous sense, because there's always something like that going on.
Always. There's, no matter how good everything's going. I love what I'm doing with VaynerSports. I'm sure if I spent an hour this Saturday and say, I spent 2 hours doing this thing and I hate it, it would make my life better. So I would do that periodically, 2 to 3 times a year. Hey, what did I do in the last 30 days? I would look at my calendar. I would look at my to-do list. I'd be like, you know what? I fucking hated that hour and a half dealing with X, Y, and Z. I'm going to give it to somebody else, or I'm going to hire somebody to do it.
I think that's very, very smart, because it opens me up to do this.
Yeah, exactly. You freed up an extra hour and a half to do this, and you're going to be happier.
Yep.
So
that's awesome. Cool, I really appreciate that.
Thanks, Mo.
Thank you so much.
Have a great day. Take care.
You too, brother. Bye-bye. Bye.